What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of We Run This. I am Chris Illuminati. With me always is Nick Domingo. Is Nick Domingo? It's one of those days, man. What's up, dude?
Not much. I'm impersonating myself. I'm going as Nick Domingo.
Today, playing the role of Nick Domingo will be Nick Domingo.
Yeah, starring as himself.
Please, please consult your playbill as the. Yeah. Did anyone ever get upset about that? Like, I don't go to a lot of plays, but I've had that happen a couple times where they're like, this person will be the role. Like, has anyone ever gone, well, screw it, I'm leaving now? Like, it's not.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, shoot. I
just paid $200 a ticket, and this person's not showing up. I just wondered if.
Yeah, this is, it's like that Seinfeld episode where Bette Midler, I think, is having a stand-in, and people won't go to the show, right? They throw their arms up. They're like, Bette Midler's not in it. I'm not going to see it.
That's a little different. What could we get at running stand-ins? Like today, running for Nick Domingo.
There are certain days where I wish I had a running stand-in. I'm sure you can agree. There's some days where I'm like, I can't even walk down the street to get a cup of coffee. So yeah, I love that idea actually.
Yeah, today was one of those days. I think I overdid it at the gym. I can explain why I overdid it at the gym, but I think I overdid it at the gym, and my lower back is kind of killing me. And so I avoided weights today and went for a run. And as I was running, like, it felt okay in the beginning, but then, like, after the first mile or two, it slowly started tightening up, especially uphills weren't as bad as downhills. Like, downhills trying to stop my momentum and, like, the slapping of my entire body,
I hate downhill running, man. I hate that. There's so much going on. You're afraid to kind of just get top heavy and fall over. It's bad, obviously, here in Seattle because you've got so many hills. A lot of times I'll be going down, and I feel like you're just killing your knees by doing it. So yeah, I hope that gets taken care of, though, man. You gotta watch those mid-run injuries are the worst because now you're like, what do? I stop and turn around? Do I just walk the rest of the way? It sucks.
Especially when you're so far away and you're like, oh god, this is gonna take forever.
Yeah, so you have to kind of find in yourself to push and keep going, right?
Yeah, if it's upper body, you can deal with it. If it's lower body, you're like, this is gonna be the worst hour of my life as I walk home.
Yeah, oh, the worst.
The reason I've been doing it so hard at the gym is because I just got an email yesterday that my gym is closing for good.
Like, not temporarily because of COVID, like Dunzo.
After 24 years of business, the gym is closing. So in my mind, I'm going to lose everything that I've gained in the past 2 months. And then with all lockdown coming again, I'm going to revert back to being a lazy slug. So in my mind, I'm going, I should probably lift as heavy as possible now to make up for the fact that the gym is closing. Like, that's a logical thing to do.
Yeah.
Kill myself now. So I don't know if I think I'm going to stay in good shape for months, or I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I'm freaking out. So I'm freaking out to the point where, so they sent this long email explaining that they're going to close and things like that. And then at the bottom of the email was like, if anyone's interested in buying any equipment or any of the stuff. And I'm like looking around my apartment, like, where can I fit a bench press and a squat rack?
Exactly.
I absolutely cannot, and I also can't afford to buy those things. But like in my mind, I'm like, where can I get where can I put this gym equipment, and how much can I spend on it?
Yeah. It's kind of like, I like your mentality though of trying to get in as much weight as possible. It's like, I would always run 10 miles on a Saturday, like when I was 25, to be like, well, I'm going to go out tonight, so I'm just going to burn the calories that I'm going to put in anyway. So that makes sense. It's kind of like what you're doing.
We do that with everything, and it's proven not to work. Like, people do that with sleep. Like, they're like, oh, I'll get 3 hours of sleep every night, but Saturday I'll sleep like 9 or 10 hours, and that'll make up for it. Like, it does nothing.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you don't catch up on sleep, you don't catch up on lifting, you don't catch up on running. It's like, it's all in our head, but it makes you feel better. It mentally makes you feel better.
Exactly.
So while I'm dealing with that, while I'm in a pissy mood about that, like today we have a guest on, and he immediately made me feel better because of what he did, except the one point in the interview when I could feel myself physically tearing up. We talked
Yeah.
were you tearing up? Was it just me?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I was like, let me hold it together. Obviously, we talked to him already, and we're recording this part prior. But we talked to Kolt Codner. He's a dad from Ohio, and his son is battling cancer at the Akron Children's Hospital, and they were not going to be able to host a run this year. And the run is where they raise most of the money for the hospital. So Kolt took it upon himself to run his own marathon around the hospital, which is insane. And we talked to him about it, and it's just a great story. And it's more about the heart and the mind than it is about running, but it's got to do with running. But it's just one of those things where you walk away and be like, all right, if that guy could do that, like I could pretty much do a lot.
Yeah. It's a tremendous story. As someone who doesn't have kids, I actually told this to my fiance, Christy, last night, where I watched a movie and I basically said, like, there's a moment where in this movie I saw is like, when you know that you're sacrificing everything for your child, that is when you know that you're ready to have kids. And I'm like, that's a huge responsibility. Like, it goes from, you have 9 months basically to prep that, all right, I'm doing this, now we're getting ready, and then all of a sudden, kid's out, I now have to do everything to protect that kid, to be healthy. And you hear that story that Kolt is going through, and you know this because you have 2 kids, that switch flips pretty quickly, where it's not about me, it's not about, I don't run for anything for me, it's I'm doing this for my son and bring awareness to help cure him and other families who are going through it. Yeah, I was like you. I caught myself getting choked up a couple times and was like, hold it together, man. Together a little bit.
And he explains too that like he really didn't have much time to think. Like it went from like something's up to get to the hospital immediately. Like you really don't have time to think about it. So that makes it even more like jarring of a moment. So, but
exactly. And to have it go through, like we talk about, a lot of the troubles and struggles we're going through. And I know you mentioned it to him when we talked to him about, putting things in perspective and to have one thing, it's like you get nailed from the right, in March with COVID. And then he said in May they found out. So, 60 days later, they find out their 4-year-old has, leukemia. And it's just another jab from the left side and to have to deal with that. So amazing story. I can't wait to see it turn out positively and how people are getting involved to help them through it.
Yeah, so let's jump right into our conversation with Kolt Codner. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of We Run This. It's Chris. Nick is here as always, and today with us is Mr. Kolt Codner. And Kolt, we were actually just messing around. We were saying how you have a better setup than Nick and I. We're the ones with the podcast, and you don't really have a podcast. However, you are somewhat of a celebrity these days because I've seen you popping up on every website. So why don't we talk about that first? I can explain it. You can explain it. How do you want to do it?
Sure. I'd be glad to kind of kick us off. So my son is 4 years old. He's going through treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia right now. And it was a really tough thing. He was diagnosed back in May. And coming up midsummer, we saw that the Akron Marathon raises funds for Akron Children's Hospital, which is the hospital where my son's going through treatment. And we thought it would be an awesome opportunity to give back and signed up for the Akron Marathon. Ran 35 laps around Akron Children's Hospital and raised a little over, we're up to $18,000 now to help support Akron Children's and to show some appreciation for that incredible institution and the care they provided him.
Well, let's go back before we get into the whole running thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. I am a father of 2. My kids are 10 and 7. Your son is 4.
Yeah.
What were some of the signs? Like what happened? How did that all unfold?
Yeah, it was some really, strange things. It was back at the beginning of quarantine. We couldn't go anywhere, so we'd put a, swing set in the backyard, and we'd noticed some swelling around his cheeks and his face, and thought like, hey, we've been hanging out outside all the time. We've been grilling. We've been doing all these things, trying to make the best of the time at home. It's probably just allergies or something like that. And wound up, we went into our family pediatrician, and she said, yeah, I don't think it's allergies. We'll run some labs. Probably nothing to worry about, though. So they sent us out to the Akron Children's location here by us to run some labs. And they said, we'll probably give you a call in a couple of days. And we got home, and about 30 minutes after we got home, they gave us a call and said, hey, we think Andrew has some suspicious cells in his blood, and he has a bed waiting for him in the hematology and oncology unit, and to get to the main campus immediately.
Wow.
Jeez. Yeah.
I mean, can you talk about what that felt like, hearing that news? And then, I mean, there's no plan of action for that, right? Like, what did you guys do? How did you respond and kind of settle him down? Because, I mean, he's 4, right? So he's not freaked out.
Yeah. So he was remarkably calm and strong through all of it. We got to the hospital, and we get there, and we're sitting in the room, and it's the first time he's ever been in a hospital room like that. And he goes, all right, guys, so what are we going to do tonight? Just like it's, we're going on vacation. It's something fun. Mm-hmm. For us, obviously it was the exact opposite reaction. It was, probably the most terrifying moment of my life. I remember driving to the hospital. We're about an hour away, thinking, when am I ever going to get to bring him home? Who knows what that's going to look like? Who knows what treatment looks like? So it was just heart-wrenching and terrifying, and the longest couple of days of my life there.
Walk us through. I mean, it must have been a huge ordeal, because that's right when COVID was starting to happen. So there's the whole juggling of, okay, we have to go to all these facilities that also are medical. So there's the double, pain in the butt of it all. Like, walk us through that. Yeah.
So it was a really tough thing. So we got to the hospital, and at that point, I was right at the beginning of the COVID stuff. They had a situation where only one parent was allowed in the hospital at a time. Because of his unique situation of being diagnosed at that moment, they said, hey, you guys can both come in. We're going to be lax on this for the first couple of days. But a couple of days in, the first night we were together in the hospital room with him. And then from that point forward, we had to trade off. One of us had to be in there with him, and one of us wasn't even allowed to be on the floor with him. So it was terrifying, and it was hard. I remember, so after that first night and he was officially diagnosed, they have a family suite at the hospital for folks that are traveling from long distances. And I remember my wife being up in the room with him, and I went down there and had, without a doubt, the worst night of my life, just sitting there worrying about, what this next, journey was going to be like.
Man, I'm like speechless right now. I mean, I guess the question I've got now is how is he doing, and how are you guys doing through all this? I know you said it was in May, so it's only been 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Andrew's doing awesome. He is the toughest kid I have ever seen. He is responding really well to treatment. Doctors are very optimistic about his prognosis. He has B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which unfortunately is one of the most common pediatric cancers. But one of the good things that comes with that is that it is incredibly well researched, and they have great protocols in place. They have great solutions in place, and they've got some great options for treatment. And so they've done a phenomenal job of making this scary, difficult, awful thing as comfortable as it can be for us. And thankfully, he has responded awesome to treatment.
Now, when something like this happens, are you the type of person who, okay, I have to find out everything I can about this disease, or do you just take what the doctors tell you? Like, how do you approach it as a parent?
Yeah, so I mentioned that first night sitting in the family center, waiting and thinking through all of those things going on, and I remember tackling and thinking through that exact thing of hey, do I want to do a deep dive into this and find out everything? And at that point, I said, nope, nothing good's going to come out of that. I can't change anything. And we were about a week into it where we finally kind of hit that point that, for better or worse, pretty much everything's out of our control. All we can do is trust him or support him, trust his doctors, trust the medical team, put our faith in God, and hope and pray for the best. So we've done some research in terms of wanting to see the best things that we can do to support him, but it's really been leaning on the medical team and asking them what are the things we need to know and not going out into the internet and searching to see what other things we can find.
Yeah, avoid that black hole. I think what's awesome about this story, outside of the obviously negative of it with Andrew, is you've taken this, and what I love about things like this is you've taken this negative and turned it into a positive. And you talked about how you've now, run and raised, I think you said $18,000.
Yep. Yeah.
And as someone, to give you a quick backstory, I've actually organized a run for pediatric cancer.
Awesome.
10 years ago. We did something called the 1 month march, where we had participants run throughout the month of September, which is dedicated towards childhood cancer. And we basically had them log their miles, and they donated $1, they donated a quarter per mile. So at the end of the month, we racked up, X amount of money, and we actually donated $25,000 to the Rally Foundation for childhood cancer. And so this is something for me that when I heard your story and Chris said that we were talking to you, I was like kind of shaking, because I've been there. It's something that I believe in and in support. And so I just kind of want to hear like your side of were you a runner before all this and you thought, I'm going to do this? Was it something you picked up on in the last 6 months and thought, this is it? What was your purpose behind, running and organizing money to donate?
Yeah. So I started running, getting back into distance running about a little over a year ago. So September, 2019, and started kind of running around the block, and with the goal of getting up to do a 5K, and I'd make it, 2 minutes I'd run, and then walk for a minute, run for 2 minutes, and kind of do that on and off, and gradually built up. I did the Pittsburgh half marathon virtually back in April. We'd signed up to do it in person, and then that disappeared like every other race. And then I started going through the process, and we saw Akron Marathon was devastated with runners dropping out. And typically the marathon raises $75,000 for Akron Children's Hospital. And when we had signed up back in June, they had only raised a few $1,000s. So it was one of those things we felt like it was an awesome opportunity to get engaged and give back something there. And running has been just this amazing stress relief for me. So I'll get up usually 4:30 in the morning, make a pot of coffee, have a couple of cups of coffee, and then try to be out the door by 5:30 and stack in some miles to try to get some clear space in my head and burn off some of that stress and think about the positive things that are going on and be thoughtful of that.
I was just going to ask, like when we talk to other people, some people use running to work through their problems. Some people use running to just get away from their problems. Did you find yourself thinking about your son more during the run, or were you kind of like blocking it out? What were you thinking about?
So I would say in general, when I go out to run in the mornings, it's a mix. There's some mornings that I'm, really thoughtful and engaged of what's going on. Some mornings I'm really, prayerful and considering things and have on Christian music. Other times I've got on, David Goggins yelling at me, telling me I need to run faster and get out the door and bust my butt. So it's a good mix. And I think like a lot of runners, it depends on the day. There's some of the days you want to have just that quiet, and you leave the earbuds at home and you're going out to enjoy the peace and quiet of the morning. And other times it's going out and, kind of punishing yourself a little bit and forcing yourself to push harder than you think you can.
Did you ever use what was going on with your son as like a motivation to run harder? You have this 4-year-old kid going through this hard thing and you can't do 4 miles in a morning. Like, did you ever self-talk yourself like that?
Yeah, without a doubt. One of the things, when we'll talk with stuff with him, he's got to do a lot of stuff that sucks, right? Mm-hmm. You're at the hospital all the time. He's got to take medicine all the time. We have got to go do hospital stays, all that kind of stuff. It's scary. It's stuff nobody wants to do, let alone a 4-year-old. And so we'll talk to him, hey, man, we got to do whatever it takes to get better. And I will find myself when I'm running, I feel tired and I want to quit. Think, dude, do whatever it takes. All you're doing is running around. You're taking steps. Your son's going through hell, and the last thing you can do is quit on your run, because you're not going to let him quit going what he has to go through. Yeah, so that's been a huge motivator.
So talk us through that day. We read your story, and I think you were quoted as saying, like, you showed up to run around the hospital to do a marathon, which is insane to think about. Most people can't even envision completing a marathon, let alone do it just around a building. But you had said that you showed up and there was like a ton of media there. So are you doing it and all of a sudden you get a little nervous and you're like, oh man, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be. Like, this is just going to be something I kept, kind of private, and here we are. So kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, so that was a crazy experience for your first marathon. To have, we had two different news channels there doing their live Saturday morning broadcast from the hospital, and every time I'd loop around, they were cutting back to what was going around. So as we were trying to raise money, we were trying to build awareness of what was going on, and the hospital PR team did an awesome job of pushing it out through their networks, and then local news heard what was going on and wanted to help cover it as well. So we had the Friday before the race, goodness, I think 6 or 7 different media interviews that we did with folks. So I had a feeling that it was going to be kind of busy Saturday morning, but I got up about 3 o'clock in the morning to drive up to Akron. I got there at about 5 and had about an hour of media before we got going. So yeah, no pressure for your first marathon to have, Cleveland's, news channels there watching you every step of the way.
Yeah, I'm sure you felt like Tom Brady, like give us a pregame game plan, man, and you're
that
like, go out and run.
Yeah. We were actually delayed getting started because they're like, well, can we do a 6:30 spot with you? We want to do that, and we want to film something for the afternoon show. Yeah, so it was definitely a unique experience there.
Nuts.
Well, the good news is you're gonna come in first, but
that was it. Yeah,
yeah,
just had to finish, right?
So, but walk us through the logistics of so the hospital okays it. You talk to them beforehand. There's going to be a person running around the building for however many hours it takes, and there's going to be news vans and stuff. Walk us through what were the procedures for that?
Yeah. So the hospital team was awesome. They did a great job of coordinating everything to make sure that the media had everything they needed that morning. They were super supportive of anything we needed that day as well. So my wife and Andrew came up as well to cheer us on, and I actually had some awesome friends that showed up, and they had a little rest station set up for me, and they had water and all the snacks and things you would need typically in a marathon. So some of my buddies had set that up, and the hospital was awesome at figuring out how we could do that in a COVID safe way as well. Mm-hmm. So they did everything they could to make it as easy as they could, and it was great. I mean, we've been able to generate close to $5,000 of additional sponsorships, to help raise money for the hospital because of the coverage the event yielded. So yeah, it was tough. There was no anonymity there. You're out running your marathon, and if you are in a race of 15,000 people, it's easy to if something injury comes up or something to bow out gracefully. Mm-hmm. There it was no matter what, run, crawl, walk, we're getting across that finish line.
Mm-hmm. Now there was a cool part where Andrew was out supporting you. Did you know he was going to be out there? Was that planned, or was that a complete surprise? Because I think you said it was right when you were kind of like, man, I'm struggling, right? Yeah, so then your son. So did you know he was going to be out there, number one? And then if so, or regardless, really, did you know that it was going to be at that point?
Yeah. So initially the plan was that we were going to be doing the run while Andrew was going through some of his inpatient treatment. And that's how the initial plan came of running around the hospital, is that, I'd run by his room, 35 times and, give him a wave and break up one of those long days. And if anything has taught us during treatment, is that things change. He'd missed counts a couple of weeks, so his counts have to be at a certain level to go through with treatment. So it wound up being kind of a blessing in disguise. So he was home, and my wife brought him up. He had made signs, and he had a drum and a trumpet and a cowbell out there. And every single time I came around the corner, he'd be cheering and yelling, and a good motivator. Run, Dad, run faster, go faster. So he did an awesome job of that. And he got there, right around, I'd say mile 15 or so. And it was awesome. He was, perfect motivation there. And I remember, running over to give him a hug and a kiss, during that lap, and taking a moment there to talk with him. And he was so excited and so happy to be there.
I feel like you're downplaying that emotion, and that's cool, but please don't, because when I ran my first marathon, it was the first race I'd ever done, no 5Ks, anything. This was sophomore year, college. Mm-hmm. I was at mile 15 or 16, and I came around a corner, and I saw a kid who I had no idea. It was this little dude, probably 6, 7 years old. I'm dragging ass, and there he is, supporting, clapping, running with me, a block. And I was getting emotional while I was running. Oh man, I got to do it for this kid who I've never seen and I will never see again. So talk about your emotions and how even when you went over there and saw him, how you got that energy to pick back up. Did he give you that spark? Was it a couple miles of just whew, wow, this is gonna be tough. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was awesome. So definitely that. And, it was kind of flashing back to that day when we were driving to the hospital when he was first diagnosed. And wondering when we'd get to bring him home, and to see how great he's done through treatment and how positive he's been, and just what a badass he's been going through treatment and super positive with stuff. And it was one of those things, again, thinking back to that motivation, that what he goes through is way more difficult than anything I'm going to do that morning. And there was no excuses. I just needed to keep pushing forward. So that was a huge motivator. And then it was great. My wife ran a few laps with me as well, and actually ran the end of the race with me. And we ran past his room that he was first diagnosed in when we were sitting there. And it was such just an emotional thing, looking at that room, thinking the emotions that day, and connecting it back to where we are now. And we've got a long road ahead. He's got another 26 months left in treatment, so he's got a lot of stuff he's still got to go through. But we have confidence that he's going to go through it, and he's going to finish great. And just like a race has a finish line, there's going to be a finish line to his treatment. And, there's going to be a much bigger celebration than what we did for me running around the building.
Did you do any type of like mapping out around the hospital, like how many times it would take, or did you just put on a run app and just figure,
Yeah. So, we spent a lot of time at the hospital, as he's been going through treatment. So we would pop out and, do runs. I'd go out and run for a few hours. My wife would go out and run for a few hours and kind of break that up. So it was a route that we had kind of practiced a few times. It was about 3/4 of a mile. So I wound up, I just put on, my Apple Watch and was tracking the distance through that. But it wound up being about 35 laps around the hospital, which was way more than I had ever ran around the hospital. There was about a 60-foot elevation gain on each lap, which wasn't so bad when you're doing 5 or 7 miles, but really beat me up doing it for 26 miles. That was a rough elevation gain. Picked up like 2,000 feet of elevation over the course of the run.
That's crazy. And, a lot of people don't like to run in general, but you're just going around this loop 35 times. So yeah. Was there a moment there where you're just like, man, this is super boring? Like, I know that it's for a good cause and you're getting inspired, so you're good, but that had to be something where you're just like you knew that it was coming. Here comes that incline. You're like, again, yep. Talk to us about that. Like, that just seems tough.
Oh yeah. It sucked. It was awesome. I had, some of the buddies that had come to set up that little aid station for me had, they would pop out and run laps with me, and they could see, when you're feeling it. And, that was awesome, having them out there to, kind of get your mind off things and keep pushing you forward as well. It's a lot tougher to quit when somebody's running with you than when you're out there by yourself. So I was fortunate. I never really hit that point where like, man, I need to quit. Around mile 18, I had come down off a curb, and my right quad just completely locked up to the point that I couldn't bend my leg. So that wasn't fun. And I remember one of the buddies I was with, he's like, how you feeling? Do you need to stop? And I'm like, no, if I stop, like, that leg's going to lock up entirely, and it's not going to be good. So we fought through that. It was a few ugly miles there, but eventually loosened up enough that I was able to keep pushing. But definitely the mental piece of it. And that's all running largely is, right? Is being able to push yourself through those times that suck, because there's a lot more times that suck than the times that feel good when you're running. You feel good when it's over, and when you hit those kind of milestone points. But a lot of times you're suffering and fighting through.
So when you're doing the race, I mean, a lot of time we go into these races, we have an idea of how we want to finish, or like how long we want it to take. With adrenaline and everything, like, did you have a time in mind? How did you do against that time? Did you break it?
Yeah, so I was kind of all across the board. When I first started down the path of doing the marathon, I was, say, hey, let's get sub 6 hours. That was just wanted to finish and knock it out. And as I started going through the training, I realized, dude, I can get that. And so I wound up at the half marathon point. I was just a little over 2 hours cruising along. The 18-mile locked up quad slowed me down a little bit. So I wound up finishing just over 5 hours. Which was disappointing in the sense of, hey, I know I had a better time in me. But again, it was a weird morning. Like, I had the morning show stopping to interview me as I was running. So, there were some unique facets to it. And, I listened to your guys' podcast about doing virtual races, and it's definitely not a normal race environment, right? If you're hurt in a normal race, it may be easier to push through, because if you push through and your leg blows out on the race, hey, you're one of 15,000 runners and no one's going to notice you not finishing. And I remember at that point, it was like, dude, no matter what, we got to finish this, because there are live news crews that have a plan to run something at the noon news, and it's going to be really depressing if it's me sitting there after doing 20 miles on the ground, failing to knock out the marathon.
I love it. Can you talk about the celebration? As you said, once you finish a race, that's when the party really starts. Yeah. How did you, your wife, and Andrew celebrate after completing this.
Yeah, it was such a cool thing. So the Akron Marathon folks had done an awesome job. They had a finish line set up there. The hospital had coordinated so that Andrew would be able to run the last quarter mile with me. So we did a lap right in front of the hospital, finished in front, broke through the finish line. I knelt down to the ground. He put the medal over me. And that was that real emotional point, where kind of the weight of everything hit really hard. Man, I was fighting. It got really dusty in there. Tears started welling up. And it was just such a cool accomplishment of something that a year ago, I mean, if you told me I'd be running a marathon, I'd have thought you were crazy. So to be able to do that and make that type of personal growth over the year, and then to have him there with me to celebrate and our family there to celebrate, it was just something left you speechless.
So as a father, I know that we always have these moments. Like you had this moment in your head where you finish and I got a little teared up thinking about it. And kids are always good at I don't want to say ruining that moment, but they're not in that moment. So I'm sure your son probably said something completely unrelated to the race. What was happening in that moment for him?
So he really surprised me. I was expecting exactly what you're talking about, that he's going to be like, okay, cool, I'm ready to go home now. Why have we been sitting outside for 2 hours?
Right. Yeah.
He was so into it. He busted through the finish line with me. And I remember after we got all done with everything and we're sitting there, and he just looked at me and said, Dad, I'm proud of you. And for a 4-year-old to look at you and say he's proud of you, that's something cool, right? He normally says I'm proud of you if you figure out how to turn on his Netflix show, right? So for him to look at me and recognize that what I did was something tough and meaningful for me, and say he was proud, it just blew me away. And hopefully that showed him something about kind of pushing yourself and doing something you didn't think you could do.
Talk to us about the response afterwards, not just when you finished the race, but the couple days after. I literally saw you. So we covered you on our website. I think I saw you on Runner's World. Maybe today. You've been all over. What's that experience been like?
Yeah, so that's been a crazy thing. CNN ran a story. We had Runner's World did stuff. People did a story. So stuff that you never anticipate. I remember I sat down, here in my office and did a 2-minute Facebook video to try to solicit the initial donations, and it reached 5,000 people, and I was like, oh, cool, that's 5,000. That's a good number. And then you're seeing the people story, getting thousands of likes on their Instagram page and everything else. So it was a really cool thing. It was neat. We had donations coming in from around the world through. The donation system that the marathon uses, and folks can write messages to you. And it was awesome to hear stories of folks that have gone through similar situations. And I remember one guy in particular reached out. He was from up in Canada and talked about his own son who went through B-cell treatment when he was a little guy, and he's 26 now, and he's awesome. And sent me a picture of his son with his family. It just a completely random thing. Somebody I'll never meet and barely know other than that random exchange. But just those kinds of positive things were such a powerful thing and such a cool thing that, there's so much, hate and negativity going on right now. And this was, right before the election, and everything was super divided. So to have all of those folks reaching out with positive messages like that and sharing stories and, supporting was just something incredible.
What you just touched on, I think is super unique, because we talk a lot about community with runners. There's a sense of community no matter what. Someone's down, you go and help them. You see people carrying other people across the finish line. But you have a different community now because you're hearing these stories. And how has that kind of helped, calm you guys down? To Chris's question before, you avoided the internet. You avoided Googling and getting all this information. And I think you're kind of seeing these success stories from people whose kids went through it before, or that you're kind of building a relationship with all through something you did. So talk about just how cool that is. That's something unique that I hope has helped ease your mind a little bit.
Yeah, it's always so awesome to hear, those success stories. One of the things that's always really tough, or was tough for us when Andrew was first diagnosed, there's all of these amazing supports that a lot of hospitals are able to offer of folks that have made gifts to their foundation. And unfortunately, a lot of times those donations and those gifts and those supports are in memory of someone who didn't survive their fight. And I remember at one point looking at Tristan, my wife, and going, God, this sucks. Every single time they tell us about a program they have, it's about somebody who didn't survive. And, we know there are so many amazing success stories. And it was so awesome to have those stories from all around the world, kind of pouring in. And that definitely the parents that are caregivers of folks going through pediatric cancer and the kids and what they're going through. It's an amazing community. We've spent a lot of time up in the oncology unit at the hospital, and you see families that are going through the same things you are, and they're some of the only people in the world that can understand what that is like, and having to make your kid do stuff that they don't want to do over and over and over again, but knowing that if you don't, there's no other choice. They've got to get better, and that's the only path. And so, it's a group nobody would want to be a part of in terms of knowing what that's like, but it has been phenomenal. And we've made friends with families at the hospital that are going through that, and being able to talk about simple things like, hey, how did you get your son excited to take his 5th medicine of the day, and what that's like, to fun things of hey, how did you celebrate when you got done with your inpatient treatment, and what are fun things you can do there. So it's definitely another community, just like that running community, of folks that'll do anything they can to try to make you feel better and support you during that hard time.
Has your family, specifically Andrew, possibly you, become sort of like a celebrity around the hospital? Like, are people like, oh, there's the marathon dad?
Yeah, so it was fun when we went in for this last round of treatment. It was the first time since we did the marathon. And we were down, he had to go down for anesthesia for a procedure, and we're talking to the anesthesiologist and the nurse, and they're, hey, we saw you on the news. And it was the day after the People story ran and the Runner's World thing ran. So they're probably all really sick of me, because the hospital, shares every single story after it runs. So it was definitely something we noticed there. And then when we were up inpatient, as they were rounding through, we had, doctors that we've never met before popping in and go, hey, awesome job. We're so proud of the stuff you guys did. So it's definitely been, a funny kind of weird thing on top of, everything we're going through.
Love it. What's next for you in terms of running? Number one, are you gonna stick with it? Are you gonna try and tackle another race? And two, what's next for Andrew and your family? I mean, what's the update on him in terms of the holidays are coming up? Like, is he gonna get to be healthy enough, hopefully, touch wood, to spend time with you guys, be at home, for all that?
Yeah. So on the running piece, definitely I'm going to keep running. That's been kind of my mental sanity through all of this, is getting out to have that time. So I got up, this morning, got 6 miles in this morning before the sun came up. So that was a nice thing. So, that's definitely not going anywhere. It's definitely weird not having a race to kind of, have that training plan built out for. I want to do definitely a real marathon at some point, where you have the race and the supports in place, and be able to do that, because I think it'll just give me a much better ability to kind of push myself than with this kind of unique weird thing was. Andrew's doing great. We just finished up our most recent inpatient experience on Monday. So we've been home a few days. He's feeling pretty good. He's got one more inpatient stay to go in this phase of treatment, and then hopefully we'll rotate out to mostly outpatient stuff. So that's definitely a lot easier when you're not, stuck in the hospital for 7, 8, 9 days at a time. You're back pretty much every week, but it's a much better situation than being, kind of holed up there in the hospital.
Do you think you've influenced him on the running front? Like, do you think that's something he'd want to try?
Yeah, it's been really fun. He's been super excited when we go out at night when he's feeling good, to go out and run. And, we got him some cool new Nikes. So he's super excited about his fast shoes and loves to tell me how much faster he is than me. So he's having a good time with it. So I think it's definitely something he'll stick with. And I don't know if you saw any of the photos from the race. He had a way better stride than me breaking through the finish line there. So yeah, I think he'll stick with it.
You had 20-something miles on him. So
fair enough.
I think it's kind of fair. Plus, he's 4. He's got a ton of energy.
That's it. Boundless energy, right? The kids are bouncing off the walls. Yeah.
You can't run a marathon around a hospital and then compare your stride to a 4-year-old. That's kind of not fair.
I'll take it. Yeah. He's doing awesome with it. My wife was, definitely the runner in the family. She ran cross country and everything in high school and loves running. I played basketball and baseball and those things. So like, you ran like when you blew a layup, right? Like that, you're going to go run Sweet 16s. So like, I never had that really like positive experience with running. Like, oh, this is a great thing that I love. And that's definitely changed a little bit as I've started to get into it. But so hopefully you picked up some of the more natural running love and characteristics from my wife than me.
Love it. So where can we find you? Where can people, help donate or follow your story and again, build or join that community, I guess, that you've talked about?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we've got all the giving information. If you follow me on Twitter at Kolt Codner, so KoltCodner. We've got all the giving information up there, and that'll link right through to the race roster page. So giving page will be up, I think, through the end of November. So if folks want to give, that would be an awesome thing we would greatly appreciate, and I can assure you Akron Children's would put to good use. Also, I've got a YouTube with some random running stuff on it. So Kolt Codner on there if folks want to find me on there and share some fun running videos. So
real quick before we let you go, what's the one thing you kind of learned about yourself through all this that you kind of hope other people will not so much pick up on, but like, what did you learn about you that you want to show other people?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things was, learning that I could do something I never thought I could do. I think back to last September, a little over a year ago when I started running, my goal was to make it around the block in a consistent run. And it's like a little over a mile, on my little neighborhood loop here. And it took me a month to get to that. And then I did the 5K and I was like, cool, that's awesome. And then my wife pushed me. She said, hey, I think you could do a half marathon. I thought, dude, you're crazy. There ain't no way in hell I'm going to run 13 miles. And even initially when I signed up for this, I had signed up for the half marathon. And I was planning just to run, the 13 miles. And, I thought, hey, man, I need to try to push myself to do something I don't think I can do. I know I could do 13. I don't know if I could do 26. Andrew does an awesome job pushing himself to do things that none of us, think a 4-year-old could do every time he goes through treatment. And so I think that was the biggest thing, is that whatever you think you can do more. And as soon as you hit that wall where you feel like you can't do anymore, there's probably something else behind that wall if you push through it too.
That's great advice, not just for people running, but people who might be going through the same experience you are with their kids or themselves, or, with everything we have coming up, in the world.
Definitely.
It's definitely some good advice. But Kolt, thanks a lot for coming on. We really appreciate it, and we wish you the best. And obviously we wish Andrew and your family the best too. Yeah,
thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Big fan of the podcast. You guys have some awesome stuff. I've been listening to it during some of those inpatient stays. Oh, so, thanks. Oh, you're the one. That's it. Great stuff, though. I appreciate it. And that brings another episode of We Run This to a close. Nick and I want to thank everybody for listening. If you love the podcast, please share it with friends or leave a review on iTunes. And remember to follow Nick and I on social media. He's at It's Nick Domingo, and I'm at Chris Illuminati on Twitter, or follow us both on Instagram at WeRunThis_pod. Until next time, see everybody out there.